Hey folks, Steve here. It's the show where I answer your questions, and this week our first question comes from Lucas Hackett, one angry brony. Steve, out of all of the two I've mentioned, which one of these two would be the most annoying TV neighbor in history and why? Steve Urkel from Family Matters or Marcy Darcy from Married with Children? P.S. Did I do that? You know what? I'm going to say Marcy is more annoying than Urkel. And what's really annoying about her compared to Urkel is she's just a normal person. I mean, yeah, she's probably way less annoying on a one-on-one basis, especially in terms of her personality. But, I mean, come on, when Urkel's around, as long as you can put up with being in the same room with him, some really interesting shit is going to happen when Urkel's around. I mean, he built a time machine. Didn't he build a time machine? I seem to remember that he built a time machine. If not, if I'm just making that up, that is at least a credible Family Matters plot, if I am just making that up. He had like a Jekyll and Hyde thing where he could turn into a completely different person, Stefan Urkel. I mean, what does Marcy have going? Marcy's just a run-of-the-mill, dime-a-dozen nosy neighbor. Gotta go with Urkel. I mean, I wouldn't want him living next door to me, but if I had to choose between the two, I think the choice is obvious.
Fuck off!
Next question is from Kiev, who says, are there any shout-out recipients who you've later regretted promoting or who have since changed their content such that you would not do so again? Do you have a list of your previous shout-outs somewhere viewers can find it? I do not have a list of previous shout-outs like in one central location. You would have to go back through all of the previous 205 videos in this series and look through them to find who all of the shout-outs were. I do have a master list on my computer. You know, I have like a list of people that I have shouted out and people that I want to shout out in the future so that I don't shout out people more than once accidentally. But it's not posted anywhere, like it's not available anywhere. And yeah, of course, there have been people that I've shouted out that I've later regretted it. I think I am far from the only person to have gone through the experience of finding a really cool YouTube channel, especially one in the atheist community, and you think, oh, this is cool. Oh, I like this person. They make some really good content. And then after you watch their videos for a few weeks or a few months or even a few years, oh, hey, look, they're doing anti-feminist stuff all of a sudden. Or, hey, look, they're having guests on their channel who are anti-feminist assholes, and they don't seem to have any problem with it at all. They seem to either be complete assholes themselves, or they sure do hang around a lot of assholes, and that might be a little troubling. So yeah, that has happened on more than one occasion, unfortunately, with people that I have shouted out. Natalie Kirk, hey Steve, I've never watched any Star Trek. If I were to dive into it, where should I start? Believe it or not, for a franchise that has existed in one form or another now for 50 years, Star Trek is fairly accessible to new viewers. It's not as though you have to start with episode 1 of the first series in order to know anything that's going on. All of the Star Trek series, from the classic original series with Kirk and Spock to all of the spin-offs starting with Next Generation and on, they're all fairly accessible. You can jump on, and even if you don't start at the very beginning, you can get a pretty good sense of what is happening. I mean, the Star Trek shows, especially original series and Next Generation, were produced with a very sort of old school classic television mentality where you could jump on at any episode. The episodes were all basically self-contained capsules, and the ongoing story arcs and the ongoing character development, if there was any, was never of a sort that you would be completely lost, you know, if you didn't start watching at the right episode. So you can jump on pretty much anywhere you want. I would recommend just diving right in. I mean, if you're looking to start with Star Trek with, you know, completely fresh, I would recommend starting with the original series and pick one of the episodes I mentioned, or just pick an episode at random and check it out, because they're all pretty good entry points into the show. And it doesn't really matter what order you watch the episodes in. Again, it's that classic TV mentality. But if you're really interested in it and you want to dive in, my suggestion is just dive right in. Don't overthink it too much. Just jump in. Patrick Dodds, Steve, a follow-up Star Trek question, if I may. Can you let us know what your favorite single Star Trek character is for each of the 5 televised Star Trek series? And if time and willingness permitting, a little reason why? Favorite single characters from each of the 5 shows? Sure. My favorite character from the original series is easy. It's Dr. McCoy. I think Dr. McCoy was the best character on the original series, and I think DeForest Kelley was the best actor on the original series. I love Dr. McCoy so much. I think he is of that central trio of characters of what Harv Bennett called the triangle at the center of Star Trek of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. I think McCoy is the leg of that triangle that is the most crucial. I think he, by the way, look, I'm in the Illuminati. Look, everybody, I'm in the Illuminati. My favorite for Next Generation, probably Riker. I just love Commander Riker so much. I think he's funny. He's kind of a little bit like Kirk, that he has a reputation of being sort of a skirt chaser. And he is shown as someone who is very, very interested in the ladies on the show, but his dealings with women are never unethical or underhanded or sleazy. He always seems like a very upright, conscientious, socially conscious person. And I think he's a great character. And he's a fun character because Jonathan Frakes was a fun actor. And his body language is just fun to watch. The way he would walk through doors head first. The way he would sit down on chairs by throwing his leg over the back. I mean, he's just a... Riker is my favorite Next Gen character. Favorite Deep Space Nine character, Captain Sisko. Probably my favorite of all the Star Trek captains. And played by a fantastic actor, Avery Brooks, who could be a good actor and could also be the best hammy bad actor you've ever seen. And I love Sisko's backstory. He has a little bit of a tormented, tortured, tragic past with the loss of his wife. And then he also has this wonderful relationship with his son that grounds him and is unlike anything we saw before or since in any Star Trek captain's life. You know, Sisko is a full man, is a full character. He is an ex-spouse, a widower. He is a father. He is a son, because we meet his father as well. And he is a commander and a friend and a peer of all these people on the station. So he's the whole package. He's a complete person. Favorite character on Voyager? I guess the Doctor. The Doctor is pretty good. Again, the Doctor actually had a character arc. He's one of the only characters on that show that had an arc throughout the series. He was allowed to change and grow. If not the Doctor, then Tom Paris. When I watched the pilot for Voyager way back when it was first originally on, when I was like 15, Tom Paris was the only character that I was remotely interested in. And that didn't last very long because the show didn't really do very much of interest with him. But in that first episode, Tom was definitely the one who I was like, oh, I could actually care about what happens to him. And Enterprise, who's my favorite character on Enterprise? The Doctor, Dr. Phlox. I think he was probably the best character. He was the outsider. He was sort of the Spock character, even though they also had a Vulcan who was supposed to be the Spock character. But Phlox was sort of the outsider character who would comment on the Earthlings and the Federation from sort of an objective perspective. And again, I thought he was the best actor on the show. I thought John Billingsley's performance as the Doctor, as Phlox, for the most part, was the best in the series. And this is coming from a Scott Bakula super fan. I thought that John Billingsley as Phlox was, for the most part, even better than Scott Bakula was as Captain Archer. So that is high praise indeed. So yeah, those are my favorite Star Trek characters from the various shows. Marv Roberts, what is your goal or what do you hope to accomplish with your An Atheist Reads series? It's very popular and I love your critique of the apologetic arguments presented. I'm just wondering, what is your underlying motivation behind the series? What caused you to create such a profound series in the first place? Well, thank you for that excessive praise there, Marv, when you call it a profound series. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoy it. I'm glad you think that of it. My goal for it, I guess, is twofold. For someone who watches the series as an atheist, my goal is to give them a starting point for their own thinking. I read The Case for Christ, and the first time I read it, years before I ever did YouTube videos about it, I thought, this just doesn't seem right. I knew I didn't agree with it, but I just couldn't articulate exactly what it was that I didn't like about it or that didn't connect with me. And then when I went through it more systematically for the series, it helped me to understand and articulate my own objections. And hopefully people who have watched the show from that same spot have found some help with that. And that's my goal if a non-believer watches the show. If a believer watches the show, I hope that they can at least understand where I'm coming from as an atheist. That's why one of the reasons why I try, especially in the later series, if you've noticed, in the ones from the last couple of years, I try very hard to be as respectful to the material as possible, and to not take cheap shots at the material or at the author if I can help it. A few still slip in every now and then. There are some times when I just can't help myself, but for the most part, I try to be as fair and as forgiving and as respectful to the material as I can, and to not be harsh and to not be sarcastic and to not, come across as though I'm attacking it or trying to prove that the author is unintelligent or whatever. And I think it's important to do that and to put that across, to put that tone and that point of view across, so that if a Christian happens to see it, they will be able to hear and respond to my arguments, and they won't be off-put by the fact that I'm being obnoxious to them or I'm bullying them. And it's good to model that behavior for other atheists as well, because there are plenty of models of asshole atheist behaviors on YouTube. They're a dime a dozen. There are sadly relatively few prominent atheists on YouTube who model the other way, who try to not be a complete jerk to the religious people. So I try to do my part for that as well. Sir Kid-A-Lot. Hey Steve, I've recently gotten into NYPD Blue, and seeing as you are a fan of gritty police procedurals, which I think is the genre that applies here, I was wondering what you thought of the series. Also, is Sipowicz actually racist, or was it all a big misunderstanding? I love NYPD Blue. I watched it when it was originally on for its entire run. Actually, not for its entire... I came in the second season. I missed the first season, but I came in the second season as Jimmy Smits came in to replace David Caruso, and I stayed with it from that point to the very end. And I was a huge fan of NYPD Blue, and I occasionally will watch it today. I think last I checked, the episodes were available on Amazon video streaming, and you can watch them there. And I think it's a great show. It's one of my all-time favorite shows, so I'm a big fan of NYPD Blue. And I think Sipowicz was racist. I don't think it was a misunderstanding. I think, especially at the beginning of the series, and for the first several seasons, maybe the first quarter, maybe the first half of the series, I think Sipowicz was definitely a racist. I think Sipowicz's racism was an integral part of his character, and it was what allowed him to have such a beautiful arc as a character, because by the end of the series, I think Sipowicz has mostly redeemed himself from the bigotry that we saw of him in the earlier seasons, or at least he's on that path. I mean, I don't know if you can ever say that someone has ever truly come out of that or redeemed themselves from that, even in a drama. But I think he's definitely on the road to being a good person, to trying to be a good person, and that's a very satisfying character arc. That long-term redemption of Sipowicz from the beginning to the end. Der Wunderbar Bar. In my view, Code of Honor must be the worst episode of TNG. What's your pick for the worst episode of all the 4 live-action Star Trek shows? Well, see, there were 5 live-action Star Trek shows. That's probably just a typo on your part. But yeah, the worst episode of all the shows. Worst episode of original series, probably Assignment Earth, the Gary 7 episode. I've never really been a fan of that. It was a backdoor pilot for another series that never actually happened. Not a huge fan of that. Least favorite episode of Next Generation has always been Tin Man. I have always just hated the episode Tin Man. It's a really, really badly written story. The acting is atrocious. Patrick Stewart looks miserable. Like every time you see a shot of Picard on the bridge, he just looks miserable for the whole thing. Least favorite episode of Deep Space Nine, one of the Loaxana episodes. That was one of the most, Deep Space Nine, I love it so much, but one of the most baffling things about Deep Space Nine was how they continually brought back Loaxana Troi as a guest character when there was no reason for her to be on that show ever. And the episodes featuring her were always just fucking awful. There was, I think, of the second one she was on, I think it was called Fascination, where her empathic qualities were sort of gone haywire, and she caused the various members of the crew to lust after each other. Terrible episode. That's probably my least favorite Deep Space Nine. Least favorite Voyager episode, popular choice is Threshold, the one where they break the Warp 10 barrier and Janeway and Paris become super evolved slugs or tadpoles or whatever, salamanders. That one's pretty damn bad. If I had to pick another one, probably Year of Hell, which was a 2-parter that was completely pointless, just a huge waste of 2 hours of your time. and one of my least favorite episodes of any Star Trek show. One of the most infuriating episodes of any Star Trek show was Year of Hell. And least favorite episode of Enterprise, probably the last episode. These Are the Voyages. Just a really, really bad episode, and an insulting episode, especially if you were one of the few remaining genuine fans of that show, because the last episode of Enterprise wound up being more of a Next Generation episode than an Enterprise episode. The conflict and the drama centered on Commander Riker, who I love, as I previously stated, but was not a character on Star Trek Enterprise. The last episode is probably my least. Now, the last episode of Deep Space Nine was dog shit too, but the last episode of Enterprise, that's not how you want to go out. Mark Aranges, hey Steve, feel like talking about The Dark Knight? Haha, of course you do. Here's a thought that entered my mind, and I think I agree with. Is The Dark Knight the only great superhero film? There have been many excellent superhero films, solid stuff for the genre, but I don't feel comfortable calling any of them great, as in having greatness, as in the kind of thing you could write essays about or talk in a philosophy lecture or a film class. None except The Dark Knight, and maybe the first half hour of Donner's Superman. Now, it's not a perfect film, there are a couple of problems with it, but unlike all the other superhero films, it doesn't throw some villain or conflict at the screen just so we can enjoy the set pieces and character interactions, but actually wants to explore themes and simply uses comic book characters to do so. It's partially why it feels more like a crime film than a superhero summer film. If you're going to define a great film as in a film that lots of people in future generations will probably think of as great, or a film that ticks a lot of the same boxes that other films that are thought of as great films tick. I think, yeah, you're right. The Dark Knight is probably so far the only superhero film that fits that mold. And I think you're absolutely right, because it is, of the superhero films, at least of the major blockbuster superhero films, it's the only one that consciously sets out to wrestle with big philosophical themes and to ask big questions, not just about the particular character, but about the nature of heroes and superheroes themselves. It is sort of following in the tradition of some of the great superhero comics from the 80s that sought to deconstruct superhero stories. The Dark Knight is a deconstruction of superheroes at the same time as it is a really terrific superhero story in and of itself, as well as a crime story. It wrestles with these very deep, troubling, thought-provoking questions in a way that no other superhero film does successfully or even really tries to. And yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's, so far, it is the only superhero film that does that, and is quote-unquote a serious movie in the way that non-superhero serious films are judged to be. So yeah, I would have to, as much as I love Superman Returns, and I would love to say no, Superman Returns is also a great film, in the way you're describing it and the way I think you mean great film, I have to agree with you. I think The Dark Knight is it. I think that's it.
Can't stop this thing, we started, baby.
That's it. That's it for this part of the video, which means that it's now time for the next round of the video, which is a little something I like to call
the lightning round.
Ahoy, Yerno. Maryland is going Clinton anyway, so let's ask the interesting question. Which down-ballot candidates, if any, are you voting for? All D for the win, or are you putting more thought into it? For some of my local elections, I have to put more thought into it. But yeah, for the most part, straight ticket for the Democrats, especially this year with what a fucking shit show the Republicans are. I think it's very important to vote against the Republicans as often as possible, and to vote for the most reliable foe for the Republicans, which would be the Democrats. So yeah, it's probably going to be a straight Democratic ticket this time. Dangerously Talented, all in brawl between all the live-action Supermans. Who wins? Well, first of all, they all gang up and they take out Man of Steel Superman immediately, because if they don't take him out, he will break all of their fucking necks and he will win the whole thing. And they know that because they're smart. So they take the Henry Cavill Man of Steel Superman. They all, everybody grabs an arm and a leg and they fly him to the moon and they bury him like in the center of the fucking moon on the dark side of the moon. Now that he's taken care of, they all fly back to an unpopulated area and they have the all-out brawl. And I think, honestly, George Reeves' Superman wins that one. I mean, have you seen that guy? He's like a bear. He's like a grizzly bear in a Superman suit. He doesn't open cans of whoop ass. He opens barrels of whoop ass. All he does is crash through fucking brick walls and punch people. George Reeves is winning that motherfucker. Justin Parallax, I hadn't heard anything about Trump and rape allegations. Could you tell me a bit more about this? Well, I think you should Google it and look it up for yourself if you want more details. But briefly, his ex-wife Ivana accused him of rape under oath during a deposition in the late 80s or early 90s, I think it was. And since then, Trump has been sued in civil court a couple of times, I think 3 times, by people who accused him of rape. Most recently, the most recent lawsuit was filed in June, and it was someone alleging that he was involved in child rape. So, yeah, there are some very, very troubling allegations made against Trump as a rapist. And if you should definitely look into it yourself, because it's not difficult to find the information. Francois Lecomte, is there a place on Earth that you really want to visit in your lifetime, and what is the reason or reasons that singles it out for you? There's a village in Japan called Shingo that I would love to visit because it's a very remote rural village in Japan, and it is supposedly the final resting place of Jesus. Now, the story that places Jesus in the village of Shingo is almost certainly completely apocryphal. Jesus isn't really there. Jesus never actually visited there. But it's such a fascinating story and such a fascinating bit of alternative history that I would love to just go there and see it for myself. Joshua Purvis. Hi, Steve. My question is, what is it that if you have any dream matches in WWE, what would they be? And who did you go for in the Cruiserweight Classic? Thanks. Dream matches in WWE right now, it's a lot of main roster guys versus NXT guys. Like I would love to see Brock Lesnar versus Samoa Joe. That's probably my number one WWE dream match at the moment. If I don't get to see Brock versus Samoa Joe before either of those guys retire, I'm going to be disappointed because I would love to see that match. And who did I go for in the Cruiserweight Classic? Actually, even though this video goes up on Friday, I'm actually recording it on Wednesday before the finale of the Cruiserweight Classic. So I don't know who wins yet as I'm recording this. If I had to pick, it would be either Kota Ibushi or Zack Sabre Jr. But they might surprise me. Maybe it'll be Grand Metalik. Or maybe it'll be TJ Perkins. I don't know. But if I had to pick, it would be either Sabre or Kota Ibushi. Probably Ibushi. HD Tank. No, wait. It's Hot Tank. I couldn't even read it. Hot Tank 500. Okay, so you seem to really enjoy DC and their classic stable. Do you ever read any other companies' work? Any favorites among the Marvel or independent works? Yeah, I do read some Marvel. I haven't read as much Marvel as I have DC, but about 15 years ago, I started getting the Marvel omnibus editions, like the newsprint reprints of the old comics from the 60s, and I ran through 5 or 6 volumes of the early Spider-Man comics like that. And those are still some of my favorite superhero comics I've ever read. I think that early Spider-Man, when it was Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, or later Stan Lee and John Romita, that is just fantastic. That's still some of the best superhero comic stuff I've ever read from any company. So that's definitely on the list. Xenoblad, is there a running joke that you don't say why you always wear a cap? No, I mean, to me, the joke is that people keep asking about it because there isn't like a fascinating origin story or some deep psychologically relevant explanation as to why I always wear a cap. I wear a cap because I just like to wear one. And I've worn one since I was a kid. I've worn one most of the time, since before I was a teenager. I've just always worn a cap. It's just part of my look. It's just a habit. It's just something that I do that I'm comfortable with. So there's not like this fascinating story that you can hear and it'll give you some deep insight into who I am or whatever. I just like wearing a hat. Kevin Logan, if you could get rid of one animal species from the planet, which one would it be and why? Oh, giant Japanese hornets. What the fuck is with those things? They're like hornets, but they're like that fucking big. Have you ever seen one? I've seen them in real life. We had them in my backyard when I was a kid. They infested this big dirt mound that my neighbor had, and they basically turned it into a giant hornet city. They were fucking humongous. What the fuck do they do? Other than kill honeybees, apparently. I would get rid of those things. Jack Coyer, in honor of the recent Star Trek anniversary, what is your favorite and least favorite anniversary installment of a TV film series? My favorite anniversary installment is probably still the Simpsons 138th episode spectacular. My least favorite is actually a Star Trek thing. Strangely enough, my least favorite is the Star Trek 30th anniversary special that they aired on UPN 20 years ago. Wow. For the 30th anniversary of Star Trek. It was basically like a 3-hour award show style presentation, just like looking back at, oh, isn't Star Trek great? So boring. Just fucking awful. Radical Bacon. So what are you dressing up for as for Halloween? I'm actually not dressing up as anything this year. It's sad. I guess I'm a grown-up. I'm not dressing up as anything. Do you have an idea? I mean, do you have a suggestion that I could dress up as something? Because I guess I'm open to suggestions. But at the moment, I'm not dressing up as anything. I'm dressing up as the most important character that anyone can play. Myself. That's it for the questions. Before I go, let's go to the shout-out of the week. And this week, the shout-out is one that I will not be retracting in the future. I can tell you that with confidence, because the shout-out this week is going to a brand new upcoming series that is currently in development. And that series is titled Polly. And if you go to the description of this video, you find a link to the Seed and Spark page for Polly. And if you read it and you think it's interesting and you can spare a couple of bucks, you can help to fund this upcoming series, which is the co-creation and will be produced under the watchful creative eye of the amazing Savannah Rodgers. She is someone who I have been privileged to be friends with on Facebook and social media for the last couple of years, and she is an incredibly talented filmmaker who focuses on LGBTQ comedy and LGBTQ sort of themed works, focusing on queer characters and queer experiences. Here's the description of Polly from the website. I quote, "Polly is the story of Jake, Cricket, and AJ, a polyamorous triad moving to the suburbs, much to the hesitation of the rest of the neighborhood. This comedy explores love, friendship, and what it's like to be othered where you call home. Let's create something never been done before." Now, how awesome does that sound? If it sounds as awesome to you as it sounds to me, again, go to the description of this video, go to their Seed and Spark page. It is seedandspark.com/fund/Polly. And again, if it's up your alley and you can afford it, throw them a couple of bucks, because it's going to be a fantastic project and you will be very, very proud that you were able to help them move it along. Polly sounds like it's going to be great, and that is the shout out of the week. Also, I want to remind you, as I always do, that you should be listening to the Lemme Listen podcasts. These are a series of podcasts produced by my very good friend Jason Harding, aka Jason with a D, the puppet master of Opinionville here on YouTube. You can listen to all of the various Lemme Listen podcasts, including the original Lemme Finish, including American Monsters and How to Destroy Them, Cinetific, Cinema Shack, and my personal favorite, the movie review podcast that Jason co-hosts with me, Late Seating, where we review a classic film, we give it a fresh look, we summarize the plot, we make fun of it, we make our little jokes and quips, and we decide for ourselves ultimately whether it deserves the reputation that it has, be that a reputation as a great film or a reputation as a terrible film. And the new episode, which goes up the same day that this video goes up, is our review of one of the most beloved films of all time. The classic 1939 fantasy musical epic, The Wizard of Oz. Yes, we are watching and reviewing The Wizard of Oz on the new episode of Late Seating. You can listen to that episode and all of our past episodes and all of the episodes of all of the excellent Lemme Listen podcasts by going to lemmelistenpodcasts.com. And I really wish that you would. If you've never treated yourself and listened to one of the Lemme Listen podcasts, I think you should definitely do that. Well, that's it for me, everybody. I am out of here for another week. Thank you, as always, for watching. Please leave a comment on this video asking me your question for next time. You can ask me anything about anything. Nothing is too serious. Nothing is too silly. And I will answer as many of your questions as I possibly can in the next video. So until the next video, take care, everybody. Hey folks, one more thing as always, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. And also, please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.